What's up, desktopers? Xavier Wills here for Desktop Bodybuilding. I'm joined live by Stanimal Stan Delonju, who just wrapped up a guest posing actually over the weekend, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But we're here to review and give a result to the 2022 Yamamoto Pro in Italy. And Vlad won. Vlad Suhoruchko. He took out that title, bring up some photos and videos and all that sort of stuff of him. Because he sort of, I suppose it was a redemption show for him because the last show he did, I don't know what he actually placed in the end of that last show, but he copped a little bit of criticism and sort of redeemed himself. So Stan, we'll bring up some photos so we can all see what he looked like as well while we're talking. But what did you think about Vlad taking out this show? Because he sort of wasn't the favorite going in, even though actually I picked him to win, which I was happy about.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, somebody people have been talking about is a young up and coming athlete with a lot of size. So and I think his main, I haven't seen much of this show, but like his main criticism is usually his posing because he's got a lot of size. He usually even brings some conditioning, but if you don't show it, you can't judge it. So sometimes that's the main. I think that's the biggest critic about him is just if he works more on his posing, he could really go much further and right now than improving on his physique itself because he's got like a lot of size and he's brought some good conditioning before. You can always improve that, but yeah, he looks tremendous here, very big.
And there's a fair few more photos as well, but you can obviously see there he looks really good. He copped a bit of criticism about potential shots in his delts and lats and stuff like that from the last show. It looks like it's definitely calmed down, and you see it a little bit there, but I don't think it was bad enough for him to not win this show. I think that he had just enough thickness through the back, and I'll try to find some more shots of that because there was some shots where it was sort of evident like how much he was ahead of Muzi from the back, and I think that sort of stood out to me. But you can see Muzi there in the middle. Looks pretty good. Vlad on the right, he just looks maybe like a different level of conditioning and just more muscle overall, man. I think that there's a back shot somewhere here, and you can see here. So on the far right, that's Vlad who won the show, and then you got Muzi here, who you can see just doesn't have that. Maybe he's dieted a little bit of the way, some of his back, and it just doesn't look as crisp and as hard as he does from the front. And then you can see Jamie in the middle as well, and he's like 6'5", so he's obviously, he's got a challenge to put on enough mass on that back to sort of match up to these guys. And I think his conditioning, we'll sort of talk about Jamie a little bit. What did you think about his conditioning? He came in fourth. He's there in the middle. Obviously, a guy that sort of sticks out a lot, in these lineups
in every way.
but what do you think about him, man? Like, I don't think his conditioning was good enough here, in my opinion. But he was crazy full, and he looked really, really big on stage.
Well, the thing is, there's a couple things actually. Jimmy was here in Vegas like a few weeks ago, not long, really maybe 3 weeks ago, with Mutant, and they were shooting videos. So he looked tremendous, but he's been traveling a lot. And I know he's doing a lot of shows back to back. Like I think he's doing this one, the one in France, the Yamamoto Cup in Italy again, and then there's the Romania and Prague. I think he's planning on doing all these shows. So as this one being the warm-up, like of course I think his conditioning is just going to keep getting better and better as the weeks go by and the shows come. And he's so tall too, so that they have to fit him a lot with Milos to bring the fullness. So they did bring him full for this show, at least full enough. I think he just can keep tightening up more, and that's what I think we're going to see over the next coming weeks from him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was at least a good experiment to try out being, as full as possible and maybe just seeing what his physique looked like being a bit fuller. And they'll probably find that happy medium. And I think it's like a balancing act with the guy like Jamie because he has, he's so big. And if he comes in too small, then he's going to be flat, So
yeah,
he's sort of like got a real balancing act there. But they obviously tried him out in the middle of this first call out as well because he probably came out looking so imposing. His quads still look hard. He's got those feathers in the medialis there, which is pretty rare. But I think just overall, if his conditioning was better, like maybe this was a missed opportunity. Like maybe he could have potentially won the show, gone close.
Looking back, I mean, this show is definitely one that was pretty wide open, I would say. Like any of these 5 guys could win the show. Like it really, came down to conditioning. And I think Vlad was the best. But you can see even like here, like the front double before and this front lat spread, he doesn't like pose to make his body like really justice. I feel like so he could I mean, just working on that would make a huge difference. And Emam looks great too there on certain shots, like here, but that spread is a little off. But the the conditioning, the size, like is I think is a fair second place here.
Yeah, for sure. I want to touch on Roman Fritz first because I did see some shots. He's here on the left. You can see here in front double bicep, he just lacks a bit in the arms for that shot. But I thought his conditioning was outstanding as it always is. But he seemed to bring sort of like a little bit more fullness to this show. There's just some more shots that he was hitting that I was more impressed with. And you can see that one from the back there. You can see his glutes are obviously like completely diced. I actually think that he even beats Emam in that rear lat spread just based on conditioning, because Emam, I think he would have probably won this show if he was in that condition, but he was in that Indy Pro last year. Do you think that Roman could have placed higher at all? Or do you think he placed sort of where he should have?
I mean, I think you could always make an argument for someone that brings conditioning to place higher anyway. And I think Roman is like, I think he's got a fast metabolism, and he probably tend to over diet. So this show, after doing I think he did Tampa in Texas. So now he's got a little more time to like eat and fill up without trying to go crazy and like grab on a lot of junk food. Just kind of like do it right. And now, like, I think his true conditioning is actually showing up because his muscle is now pushing against the skin, so you can see like the back of the legs and glutes, hamstring, all that stuff is really peeled, like the back. I mean, the conditioning is there. It was just not showing, I think, the weeks prior because he was just too flat, over dieted, and he trying to fill up with like a lot of garbage food, and that doesn't give you the best look. It gives you that watery, flat feel like look, so it just doesn't bring his physique really to life, unfortunately. So yeah, I think that was good to see him do that show and like kind of see where his conditioning actually is, and if he keeps competing, I think we can see him getting better over the next coming weeks too.
For sure. There's a decent bit of video here. We can obviously see the winner here, Vlad Suhoruchko, or however you pronounce his last name. Obviously got a huge amount of muscle. Obviously structurally, I think he's going to have a real tough time at the Olympia, which is no knock on him because he's obviously good enough to win this pro show and qualify for that Olympia. But we've got like 30 guys in this Olympia lineup, so it's going to be hard for him there. But credit to him, man, for getting to the Olympia because he's obviously been trying for a couple of years, just missed out last year, I think by 1 point in the point standing. So he just basically missed it, I think, on the last show to qualify for that Olympia. So had he placed one spot higher at any of the other shows like last year, he would have qualified. So it's cool to see him get that qualification. But I think this show was sort of a missed opportunity for a lot of guys, like even guys that were in the show but just missed their peak a little bit. They could have won it. And I think that, man, I would have loved to have seen you in this show because the way you look at your posing this weekend is gone. Like, had you been 4 more weeks ahead of schedule, I think you could have really shaken things up at this one and matched up really, really well.
Thank you. Yeah, I was actually thinking about that, but like seeing Suhoruchko conditioning right now and how much size he has, I mean, I think I could have placed, but like, I mean, especially right now, I'm not ready. Like I need, a couple more weeks. So, but yeah, I mean, when I looked at the lineup, I was like, oh, that's a good battle for me. I could definitely do something there, but like, got to stick to the plan, and we got a good plan so far. So I'm excited for the Legion.
Yeah, for sure. So Legion, how many weeks out is it? 4 weeks?
4 weeks exactly. Like, except it's gonna be on Sunday, 4 weeks from now.
I'm glad I got that right because I actually just recorded a bodybuilding news video before, and I haven't quite put it up yet. I've pretty much done 90% of the editing, and I mentioned that. I said Legion's 4 weeks away, and I thought straight afterwards, I'm like, I hope I got that right.
Yeah, no, it is because it's October 9th, and we're September 11th today. Yeah.
Yes,
so,
and I'll bring up some video from that. But overall from the show, I'll get your overall view. What did you think of it in terms of, I suppose, like the quality was not what it was at the Texas Pro and some of these other pro shows, obviously, but what did you think of, I suppose, the conditioning of the guys, how they came in overall? Because there's a few guys like Jamie, and I think Muzi, his physique was getting a little bit tired, and Mohamed sort of missed the mark in terms of conditioning. But what do you think overall of these guys?
Well, I think what's interesting, and I was talking about that with a friend of mine, Theo Leguerrier, like a week ago about, is that in Europe, it's easier to win a show, but the depth is like, it's easier in the sense to win a show because there's not as many big names, but the quality of the lineup usually is, except, when you compare to Texas, who was like really stacked, but the quality of the lineup usually is pretty deep. So anybody, it's like in a sense like not known athletes or less known, but they can really shake things up like any shows. I mean, you see Suhoruchko, who's been placing anywhere from like second call out to first place. Like he's been all over, depending on the conditioning of other guys. Because the other guys usually, like in Europe, they really bring. I mean, I say in Europe, it's not just Europeans, but like people from outside of the United States, so people from Middle East, people from Eastern Europe, they're all like competing in those shows because it's easier to travel to, and they usually have really good conditioning to that they bring to the stage. So they always like bring the bar high as far as the condition goes, and then the shape, it's anybody's game. So and when you get
It's
guys from sorry.
It's funny to me how the different nationalities seem to have different sort of strengths. Like we're seeing a lot of guys, like right now we're obviously seeing a ton of guys out of is it Nigeria? Like where you got
Yeah.
Quentin Arai, you got Blessing, you got all those guys. And we've all got the bubbly muscle. Then you've got the Italian guys that seem to come in shredded, like don't have as nice shapes in general, but they're just like absolute blocks of muscle that's just really conditioned. So it's you sort of get a different flavor with some of these European shows compared to the US shows, because US shows you get more Canadians, Americans, and you get a few Europeans going in there, but in general you're getting mostly the sort of Americans, getting a combination of African American sort of genetics and then all the white guys and stuff as well. So it's cool to see those different sort of shapes and genetics and all that sort of stuff on stage. But yeah, I think this show was obviously not the strongest of the year, but I'm looking forward to seeing the Legion. I know obviously you're doing that show. You got Tony O'Burton. You got do you know who else is actually in that show?
No, I mean, I know Tonya was thinking maybe Justin Rodriguez and Steve Kugler were going to jump in. Steve said he's busy trying to have kids. So
oh, really?
Yeah. And Justin, I don't know, like his body changed super fast. We talked, but like I haven't asked him if he's planning on doing Legion. I just know that he can change really quickly. So who knows, in 4 weeks if he'll be ready, he might be jumping into, because the Legion is the last one in the States to qualify for the Olympia this year. Other than that, it's until November after Romania. So November 5th, so November 10th. So I think is the deadline to qualify for this year.
Yeah. Romania is the last one, I believe, because Brett Wilkins doing that. Yeah, that should be a good show. I don't know which one Crizzo's meant to be doing. I don't know which one, like those guys are jumping into, and Justin Rodriguez, as you mentioned as well, because Justin, if the Legion is the last qualifier in America, like unless he's going overseas or just hoping that he stays right up there in points, then he won't be able to qualify for Olympia.
Well, there's what's his name? Andrea Muzi is like, I think the second, maybe now he's first in points. So he's like right. It's Justin, Theo, and Andrea Muzi, I believe, the top 3 in points right now. I don't think Theo is going to compete again unless he has to try to make more points. But I think they're pretty high up. Like now that Vlad was kind of like the guy behind it, and he's not qualified, I think they're pretty safe. But unless they start doing all the shows, because there's a lot of shows coming in Europe, like I said, Italy, France, Romania, and I think there's one in Spain too. So there's like 4 or 5 shows in Europe over the next 8 weeks.
Do you think there's too many shows now?
It's hard to say too many, but yeah, there's. I mean, the whole thing too is this year there's more than, it's been over a 12 months period to qualify for the Olympia. Because the last year the Olympia was in end of September or early October, I forgot. I think early October. So, and now this year it's in December. So like, for example, the Legion, Sean Clarida won last year. He's qualified for the Olympia in 2022 through the Legion, and whoever wins in 4 weeks is going to be also qualified for the 2022 Olympia from the Legion, but a year later. So it's kind of like
to get doubles up.
Yeah. So there's going to be 2 Legion champions going against each other from 2 different years for the same Olympia. So that's something that's way different.
I think we'll get the opposite next year, man, because obviously it's I think it's going back to October possibly or something like that the year following. So we'll have a shorter period of time. So maybe that will be sort of like the right amount of guys will be qualifying next year.
Yeah, I hope so, because 30 is a little much for sure. Over 30 guys. I think 20, if you're just slightly above 20, it's okay. But like when it's above 25, it starts to be like too many athletes.
Yeah, for sure. We've got a question here from Based Bodybuilding TV. He says, do you guys think if James Hollingshead jumped in, he would have placed top 3? I think if James Hollingshead jumped in, he would have won this show hands down. Absolutely no doubt. What do you think, Stan?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know exactly where he's conditioning at right now, but it's coming in pretty good. Like, he's really hard, and he's got all the size. So if he's dry enough from the back to hang with Vlad, I think it would be an easy win for him. Yeah, but he's going to be competing soon anyway. He's doing France or no, UK first, I believe.
Arnold UK, and then I think there's France. Is France a week or two after?
Yeah, it's like a week or two. I think it's the week after, and then Italy again.
Yeah,
So.
and I wanted to mention as well, obviously your guest posing, I'll bring that up just now if I can figure out how to do that. But you look tremendous, man. Like I wanted to give you a shout out
Thanks.
because it's people sort of, I suppose, a lot of people were sort of making these jumps from, from going from 212 to open and stuff like that. But you've made the jump from men's physique to classic physique and now to open, which is pretty crazy. And man, like you obviously guest posing here 4 weeks out. It looks like the conditioning's sort of there. Like it looks like there's just maybe just a little bit of water to come off and then just that tiny little bit of conditioning left. But
Yeah.
how did you feel you looked after, watching this video and seeing yourself on stage? Because it gives yourself obviously a different perspective than just like gym shots and looking at yourself every day.
Yeah, I mean, especially being on stage, because we did individual guest posing, and then we had a little group with Brian, Quinton, Steve, all 4 of us on stage. So can see a little bit where, size wise where I stand, and I think I'm good with that. I just want to keep bringing more conditioning. Just more tightening up to the glutes. I mean, hamstrings are pretty good. It's more like lower back glutes right now, like little details around shoulder, arms, like keep tightening up. And fullness, I'm happy, even though we've been on the same diet for the last 8 weeks, and we started changing things up like today, because I had COVID just before my prep, so I lost a lot of weight, and I'm just trying to get the muscle back, and we've been doing that. So like it's funny because I stayed at right around 250 this whole time and just like get tighter at that weight.
Yeah.
So it's different prep for me, like going into the show, but it's definitely fun and it's good, and I'm very happy with the progress I've made in like somehow a short period of time, because I did compete in December at the Toronto Pro, and then so I had a little bit of an off season, but I got some injuries. I hurt my legs. I had some digestion issues, and then I got COVID. So it was not like the ideal off season like I wish I had, but still put on like a solid 10-15 pounds of stage weight. So I'm very happy with that and excited to see how I compete next to the guys in 4 weeks.
Yeah, and this is a cool comparison too, because obviously Quinton is, in my bodybuilding news video, I mentioned you guest posing as well, and obviously Quinton and Brion and whatnot as well. But Quinton obviously looks like an absolute monster. It's the biggest I've ever seen him. And you stand next to him, it's like you obviously got the more conditioning and all that sort of stuff. But it's a cool sort of comparison.
Yeah.
How did it feel standing next to Quinton on stage? Obviously, he's sort of full blown off season, and you're 4 weeks out. How did that feel?
I mean, I saw him, like we saw each other in the gym, but then I saw him yesterday, and I was like, "Oh, you at 290?" He was like, "Yeah, right on." I was like, "Oh, okay." At 6'1", that's a big guy. He's got huge legs. I mean, people say he needs to keep improving his back, but he's got one of the best genetics right now. That Nigerian genetics, like we were talking about, like him, Andrew, Blessings, like there's a lot. And actually, Studios was here yesterday, and he claims me as a Nigerian competitor too now, because I did compete I got my pro card for Nigeria when I competed in my physique. Yeah, because I lived there when I was a kid.
Oh, that's crazy. How did that come about?
My dad was working in Africa for like import export coffee, cacao, stuff like that. So I ended up being there as a baby, really, like literally a baby. I have no memories of it, but it's always fun to throw out there.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So you're part of, not exactly part of genetics, but you can say, "Hey, me, Blessing, Quentin."
Yeah.
That's funny, man. Awesome. But I wanted to as well just mention that we're going to be starting a new show. I don't have a name for it. If you have any ideas in terms for a name, let us know. I'm just trying to look at the questions at the same time. But yeah, we're going to be starting the show. Basically, it's going to be based around us going live. It's going to be on a Friday afternoon, evening in the US, Canada sort of times. I'll be putting up a thing the day before, so you guys can sort of schedule it and put the notifications on for when we do go live. So if you want to get in the comments, basically it's going to be a show for you guys, for fans. So you can basically get in the comments, ask us questions live. If there's too many questions, we're going to have like the super chat thing. So if you want your question bumped to the top, it's like, you can put $2 on there or $1 and you sort of get featured on the channel. So if you do want to obviously get involved with that, I'm going to be posting on my Instagram page as well what times that will be going live. And Stan and I are going to be on it, and we're going to be getting a few other guests coming through as well, like hopefully like Chris Cormier, Milos. He's always great to have on the show, and he always has big opinions and stuff. And some of the guys from a Bodybuilding University podcast as well, and Auras and all that. So it's going to be really, really cool having a bunch of guys rotate through this show and getting, random guests on that might be coming up to competing and all that sort of stuff. So very, very much looking forward to that one. And I think it's going to be fun, Stan.
Yeah, I mean, so it's, there's like questions that you get, kind of like every day in your DMs, like basic questions, but sometimes it's like an interesting question and like starting a conversation about it. I think it's always great. Like lately, I mean, I don't want to start subject, but maybe I can give some ideas. But like I've been talking with some friends about like the post-show blues, how we focus on one show for months and months at a time, and then when it's over, it's kind of like, oh, now what? There's like this phase of like transitioning from like looking your best to looking worse to finally start making progress, and it's like all these mental challenges. And so, I mean, there's so many things to talk about. I think that it's gonna be very interesting to be able to have this discussion with everybody and maybe bring some more awareness about some challenges that people might have as far as what it is combining their jobs with the lifestyle of bodybuilders and whatever it is. It's gonna be interesting. Even talk outside of bodybuilding, obviously. Like, I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah, and I enjoy the off-topic stuff as well, and it's cool to sort of get into the mind of like you guys, like as pros, and then just I suppose just people getting to know you as well, getting to know the personalities, and like we're seeing that obviously with Fuad's podcast and a lot of these other podcasts. I suppose it draws you to the characters more, and it creates more excitement for bodybuilding. And you get, one guy saying one thing on one podcast, and someone might do an interview and have a response, and it doesn't need to be like nasty back and forth, but it's sort of fun and creates more of the character. And we see that in other, things like UFC and all these other big sports that promote things really well. It's all about building the characters, and then people want to see it play out. They want to see who wins, who does what on stage, and all that sort of stuff. And I think we need more of that. And I've mentioned it, I think, a few times on the podcast. I watch Drive to Survive, which is the F1 like sort of series where it basically sort of follows the teams, and man, it builds the characters, and it's literally got me into watching F1. And if we can do the same thing for bodybuilding, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like so I don't really watch UFC and stuff like that, but I like to watch the leading up to a show. Like the whole build up, like what the people, the guys' mindsets, what their what their struggles are, like what they're dealing with injuries or whatnot, and like how they go about it, how they all that stuff to me is more interesting than the fight itself. And same thing with Drive to Survive. I love, like, my dad used to watch F1 like every Sunday growing up. Like I didn't really care for it, but I still have a little bit of knowledge about it because of that. But now I'm like, I want to know, I want to watch, I want to see, Hamilton or like whoever, like how they're doing, because they just, it's like when you watch that Netflix show, it's sick. And like I don't know how the guys can do that, driving so fast, and like they come so close to each other. Like I don't know how there's no more accident. It's insane.
I actually watched the race tonight, and it was like, but sometimes put you in like that cockpit cam sort of thing, and it's like, you actually realize how crazy it is, because you sort of watch them and you're like, if I got good enough, I reckon I could do it. And then you sort of see it and you're like, nah, you can't. Like, they've been doing that since they've been like little kids,
I blink too much. I could never drive this fast. Like, I would be terrible. Blink, I'd be in the wall and too late.
And I'm too reactionary, man. I'm too jumpy. Like, if someone jumps out and scares me or something, I just like jump to the other side of a room. So we have another question before we wrap this thing up. Based Bodybuilding TV says, what are your guys' thoughts on Jamie the Giant not placing top 3? Now, my opinion is that Jamie just wasn't conditioned enough, but he sort of stands out so much. So it's like, it's one of those tough things where it's like, do you say that, look, he's got so much muscle overall and he's got great shape for a big guy as well, that it gives him a nod over other people? But I just don't think his conditioning was there enough to warrant. I mean, you can make arguments against the guys ahead of him, because Muzi really didn't have much in terms of the back, and you could make that argument. You could say Emam, wasn't conditioned enough overall, but he did have a lot of muscle and on that frame. So yeah, it's a tough one. I think the judging was pretty good in the show. what was your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a balance between muscularity, conditioning, and symmetry. And I think symmetry and muscularity were pretty good for Jamie, even though muscularity is still on this, because he's so tall, it's still on the lighter hand, like lighter, so to speak. For his height, is super heavy, but for his frame, he's still on the lighter end of things. His symmetry and conditioning wasn't like the best yet. I think he needs a little more time, and which is, like I said, going to bring over the next couple coming weeks. So I think his judging was just reflecting that, and I think it was fairly judged. I think Suhoruchko was just the best combination of muscularity, conditioning, and balance, and today that was enough, good enough to win. And second, Emam was just, I had a little more of two out of those three criteria, and that's how he was ahead of Jimmy with Muzi. That's all it was today. At the end of the day, I think.
Yeah,
because Muzi
completely agreed with the judging.
Sorry,
I completely agreed with the judging. To be honest, like, I think it's
pretty
good.
No, I agree too. Like the three guys ahead of him, they're all more muscular than him and more conditioned. So I think that's all it took for him to slide on fourth place. But again, like in 4 weeks, if he comes in tighter, he might just completely shift and being I think he'd be in the top 3 soon.
Yeah, for sure. I think that if he could, obviously it's an easier said than done to say, come in tighter but the same fullness. It's like, it's much tougher just.
But once you're tighter, you look bigger. You look bigger once you're tighter, so yeah, it's going to be a tricky thing. I don't know how much flatter, I don't know how his physique reacts. Obviously, he's so tall and he's such a big frame to fill out that a little bit less fullness can have a big impact. But I think he can sacrifice a little bit of fullness for more condition and place higher at the end of the day, because I think his strengths are more his line and conditioning than side. I think he's never going to be the biggest guy because of his structure is just so massive. So he needs to play with his strengths, and I mean that's what I'm trying to do.
For sure, man. How much harder is it now that you're bigger to get in condition? Is it harder for you compared to when you was in classic physique?
Honestly, it's harder in a sense, because in classic physique I would get lean, like basically doing no cardio, eating burgers, like it was just completely different. But I was wasting muscle too at the end of the day to make weight. So, and now I have a different coach, so it's a different approach. But getting in shape is not really, really hard. Did I lose you? Well, if some people are still in there,
I'm back. Can you hear me?
I was gonna say the main difference is that like when I talk to the judges usually and ask for feedback, they used to see me so conditioned for classic physique because to make weight I had to sacrifice muscle, and now it's to trying to come in as tight without losing any muscle because I can't afford to in open. So that's the real trick at the end of the day. But like conditioning itself for me, that comes easier than the size. So yeah, it's more like what the judges are used to see from me, and that they compare that as far as conditioning reference, and so bringing that without sacrificing size, that's the tricky part for me.
Yeah, and that's tough, man, especially with all that new muscle you got on your physique as well. So I know obviously from seeing physiques over the years that people have added muscle relatively quick, like yourself, and you look at like Quentin Araya and guys like that, it's hard to get that muscle super conditioned when it's new muscle. But I think the longer you have it on your physique and the longer you're doing it, man, you're just going to get better and better. So it's exciting, and I'm excited for Legion in 4 weeks' time. But anyway, man, we'll wrap this one up. But like I said before, everyone, make sure you check out the new podcast, which is coming out. We don't have a name for it yet. So if you do have names, put them in the comments below. Let us know what you thought of the 2022 Yamamoto Pro Italy, what you thought of the results, who you thought should have placed higher or lower, and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, that's it for myself, Xavier Wills, and Stanimal Standalonju. Check him out on Instagram and all that sort of stuff. If you look up Stanimal, you will find him on there. And just get in the comments. So that's it for myself, Xavier Wills, and Stan DeLonju. We are out.